Every great artist has a period of time when they are simply untouchable. Greatness attends everything that they do in some shape or form. It doesn't last for long, but while it lasts, they catch fire in such a way that their names are spelled in the sky.
हम दोनों एक साथ इस फुटपाथ से उठे थे, लेकिन आज तुम कहाँ रह गए और मैं कहाँ गया? आज मेरे पास बिल्डिंगें हैं, प्रॉपर्टी है, बैंक बैलेंस है, बंगला है, गाड़ी है, क्या है तुम्हारे पास?
Hello and welcome to a special episode of Khandaan, a Bollywood podcast. My name is Amrita, and today I'd like to tell you about Amitabh Bachchan and his miracle year. When Indians say Amitabh Bachchan is the greatest movie star their country has ever produced, it has become fashionable now for a vociferous few to offer caveats. For example, what of the southern industries? What of Bachchan's predecessors? Or even his successors, such as the Khan trio? I'm not saying these questions are not valid, but I think with the passage of time, people don't appreciate just how monumental Bachchan's success was at a time when we had no social media. You had to book your very expensive long-distance telephone calls, and people got their pop culture from the radio. It was in this era that Amitabh Bachchan became a household name. Think about your favorite artist and you will be able to recognize that time period in their career when they were at their creative peak. Steven Spielberg, for instance, continues to make incredible movies, but that period between Jaws and arguably Catch Me If You Can, or Saving Private Ryan if you're being difficult, is a streak that redefined Hollywood cinema for multiple generations. Michael Jackson had those 10 years when he was the moment. We throw that term around like confetti these days, but if you lived through the Michael era, you know what that term meant. It happened to Rajesh Khanna, Amitabh's immediate superstar predecessor, in the period between 1969 and 1971 when everything he touched turned to gold. In 1969, for example, he had Aradhna, Do Raste, Bandhan, Doli, and Ittifaq. In 1970, he had Kati Patang, Sacha Jhoota, Safar, The Train, and Aan Milo Sajna. This was followed by Anand, Haathi Mere Saathi, Dushman, and Maryada in 1971. It was such a fabulous run of movies that it changed Hindi cinema, creating a visual and stylistic break from the movies of the big three, Raj Kapoor, Dilip Kumar, and Dev Anand. It was into this brave new world of the 1970s that Amitabh Bachchan made his entry. South Hindustani, his debut movie, released in 1969, just as Rajesh Khanna fever was gripping the country, but the 1970s will forever be known as the Bachchan years. And a big part of that has to do with the movies that released between 1977 and 1978. Here is a partial list of the movies that released in a roughly 18-month interval. Iman Dharam, Khoon Pasina, Kasme Waade, Amar Akbar Anthony, Parvarish, Ganga Ki Saugandh, Dawn, Chupke Chupke, Trishul, and Muqaddar Ka Sikandar. In today's episode, I want to talk about a 12-month period covering October 1977 to October 1978, a year that Bachchan himself hails as his miracle year, where 5 of his movies became legendary blockbusters, one after the other. It starts with Parvarish, then Kasme Waade, Trishul, and Dawn in the same month, and finally Muqaddar Ka Sikandar in October 78. If you're an Indian, then irrespective of whether you follow Hindi movies or not, you've at least heard of some of these films. If you're a Hindi movie buff or grew up in a Desi household prior to 1995, or maybe even later, you've seen all of these. Parvarish, directed by Manmohan Desai, is the most masala version of the debate around nature versus nurture. 2 brothers are brought up in the same law-abiding household, but one of them is a bad seed, adopted as a baby when his biological father was sent to prison by his adoptive dad. So who will the son choose? His evil bio-dad or the police officer adoptive dad who sent his bio-dad to jail? This is a Desai film, so of course there are plenty of twists and turns and an excellent villain's lair that requires transport via a little two-person submarine that absolutely delights me every time I think about it. It co-stars Vinod Khanna, with whom AB shared some incredible chemistry, and also stars Shami Kapoor as their dad, as well as Neetu Singh and Shabana Azmi as their love interests. If you haven't watched this, I highly recommend it. Kasme Wade, the first of our 1978 releases, on the other hand, is a beast of an entirely different kind. Randhir Kapoor plays a spoiled younger brother who inadvertently gets his professor brother, played by AB, killed, and then spends the rest of the film trying to get his brother's fiancée to take AB's thieving lookalike for a husband instead. Like, bro, the man's an uneducated thief who she literally meets for the first time when he's trying to rob her. He couldn't be any more different to the man she loved and lost if he tried. Anyway, the psychology of this film is pretty darn weird as a standard for many an Indian classic, but this film is one of many that prove my point that AB had the most sizzling chemistry with Rakhi. They could do more by simply staring at each other than most actors can do with their clothes off. Sorry to all the AB Rekha shippers. Their chemistry continues in the next movie, Trishul, directed by Yash Chopra before he gained a reputation as India's most romantic director, and written by Salim Javed, who have not shied away from taking at least partial credit for AB's superstardom. Trishul is one of my all-time favorite movies. In fact, this and Kala Patthar are two of my top Yash Chopra movies. If you watch the scene where AB reveals his identity to Sanjeev Kumar and says, "Aap mere najaiz baap hain," or "You're my illegitimate dad," in a neat twist on the commonly used phrase, and you don't feel the satisfaction of that moment right down to your bones, I'm sorry to inform you that your soul is dead. Talking about people with dead souls allows us to neatly transition to Dawn, the famous precursor to Shah Rukh Khan's Kitschy 2000s remake. This movie's backstory is good enough to be a movie by itself. It starts with its producer, Nariman Irani, who was a cinematographer who worked often with Manoj Kumar. If you don't know who Manoj Kumar was, he was an actor turned director who specialized in genteel yet melodramatically jingoistic movies whose central thesis was India is the best. Irani had sunk his own money into a movie he produced with Sunil Dutt in the lead, but it sank like a stone and he was in serious debt, and everyone knew he couldn't pay them off on a cinematographer's salary, especially back then. So various people on the sets of Manoj Kumar's Roti, Kapda aur Makan came together to help out. Assistant director Chandra Barot offered to direct. Amitabh Bachchan, Pran and Zeenat Aman worked on it between paying gigs, and they convinced Salim Javed to hand over one of the rare scripts they'd been unable to sell. Irani died before the film could be released, but the movie would go on to become a cult classic, and the profits were enough for Irani's widow to pay off his debts. It's one of those Bollywood is really just a big family stories that seems so foreign today. Anyway, if you haven't seen the original Dawn, you should definitely check it out today. The surviving prints are uniformly terrible, but even that can't hide its style. And so we come to the last movie in our list, Muqaddar Ka Sikandar. Based on the Bengali novel Devdas, loosely based on the Bengali novel Devdas, written by Sarat Chandra Chattopadhyay and successfully adapted to screen multiple times all over the country, Muqaddar was a 70s masala version of the story. Amitabh plays a man whose childhood sweetheart loathes him and whose sexy mistress would die for him. It's loud, melodramatic, full of angsty songs and actors at the peak of their game, from Rakhi to Vinod Khanna to Rekha, Amjad Khan, and of course Amitabh Bachchan. It was directed by Prakash Mehra, who was one of AB's steady collaborators. Together they made 9 films, the first of which was Zanjeer, which will always be a classic of Hindi cinema and gave birth to the angry young man persona of Bachchan. Some of their other movies together includes Hera Fairy, Khoon Pasina, La Varis, Namak Halal, and Sharabi. This movie is also notable for one of Rekha's most famous prostitute with a heart of gold roles. Hindi cinema truly had no idea what to do with a beautiful woman who was not afraid of her sexuality and also knew how to act. And so the easiest answer was to turn her into a courtesan, but one that could ultimately be turned into a wife or have the grace to sacrifice herself for the hero. I began this essay by calling it Amitabh Bachchan's Miracle Year, but it's also a testament to the creative energy of the people working in Hindi cinema at the time. These movies were written, produced, directed, and made by teams of people who were incredibly badly paid, with few creature comforts, and in times of great political upheaval. Amitabh Bachchan was the face of this industrious group of creatives who made great works of art with a fraction of the resources Hindi cinema has today. And in true blue superstar fashion, AB turned around and did it again in 1982 to 83, just before he began his flirtation with politics. He made Satte Pe Satta, Namak Halal, Khandaan, Shakti, Nastik, Mahan, and Sharabi. But that's a list for another day. This episode was made possible by our subscribers over at the Khandaan Podcast Patreon, which you can join from $1 onwards. Your support allows us to create new content, and you get a range of rewards from early access to merch. Follow us on Khandaan Podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Thank you for listening. My name is Amrita, and this is Khandaan, a Bollywood podcast.